In 1850, hundreds of Mormon pioneers headed for the Salt Lake Valley. But this isn't going to be a dry history lesson about maps and dates. No, we're going to get into the raw, human story by looking at what they actually wrote in their diaries. And what we find is a journey defined by this incredible, almost unbelievable ordeal of contrasts.
Right from the start, the stakes were incredibly high. Just listen to this one line from a pioneer named Minerva Stone. "Our road is a perfect burying ground." Wow, that just says it all, doesn't it? This was never going to be some scenic adventure. It was a trial of life and death, where the very path they walked was turning into a cemetery.
So let's set the scene. It's June 1850. You have hundreds of people, all their worldly possessions packed into wagons, all their cattle, and it all starts with this great sense of purpose. There was a plan, a structure, designed to get every single person safely to their new home.
And that organization, it was meticulous. Just look at this breakdown of one small unit in the company, Gardner Snow's group. 10 wagons, 66 cattle, 46 people, 13 sheep, even 11 guns. Everything was counted, every person, every animal, every resource was accounted for. This structure was supposed to be their shield against the chaos of the trail.
But that chaos, it found them anyway. And the single greatest trial they faced on this journey was disease. We're talking about cholera. This is really the first and most devastating contrast of the whole story. This beautiful promise of a new life completely overshadowed by the constant, grim reality of death.
To get a sense of the scale of this thing, listen to what Mary Eddy V. Smith wrote, "An unbroken succession of burying grounds." It's just a terrifying image. This wasn't one or two tragedies. The epidemic was everywhere, turning the trail into this long, seemingly endless cemetery.
And the tragedy wasn't abstract. It was immediate and it was personal. Diarist Angelina Farley writes about a child dying from measles, not in some other company miles away, but, quote, "in the wagon next behind us." Can you just imagine that? The loss, the grief, happening just a few feet from you every single day?
And yet, here's another one of those incredible contrasts. Even as they were burying their dead, life quite literally went on. On June 29th, right in the middle of this cholera epidemic, Captain William Snow notes in his journal that a sister Beebe gave birth to a fine girl. Birth and death, happening side by side, sometimes on the same day. It's just at the very heart of their experience.
Angelina Farley, the diarist I just mentioned, did something really remarkable, and frankly, horrifying. She kept a running tally in her diary of the fresh graves she passed along the way. It creates this chilling, real-time record of the journey's toll. So, let's follow her count.
By June 28th, they're only about a week in, and she's already counted 15 fresh graves.
Less than a week after that, her count more than doubles to 33. And get this, that number doesn't even include the 6 people who had already died in her own camp. By the time they get to Fort Kearny on July 12th, the number of graves she's counted since the Missouri River stands at a staggering 53.
But even finding a grave wasn't always the end of the horror. The day after they left the fort, she recorded this. One of the graves they passed had been dug up and the corpse eaten by wolves. The fear wasn't just of dying. It was of being completely erased from the world in the most brutal way you can imagine.
So you have this massive, terrifying threat from the outside. But the pressures were also coming from within the group. The ideal of this unified, supportive community started to clash with the hard reality of human conflict. And you can see this breakdown of order perfectly in this dispute between two captains. On one hand, you have Captain William Snow. He expects everyone to pitch in, share what they have, and help those who are struggling. But then there's Captain Lucian Noble. He refused to lend a spare cow to someone in need. He kept buffalo meat just for his own little group. He was basically putting himself first, and that threatened the whole idea of communal survival. While the whole thing eventually boiled over in the scathing letter from Snow to Noble. He accuses him of abandoning the needy, and then he drops this bombshell. He says that cursings instead of blessings will follow him, and he says it in the name of Israel's God. This was way more than just an argument. For them, it was a full-blown spiritual crisis.
And it wasn't just the leaders who were at odds. The tension was everywhere.
Angelina Farley wrote about a fuss in the camp that got so heated, one man actually pulled a gun on another. It just shows you how frayed everyone's nerves were and how quickly things could spiral into violence.
So, through all of this, what did they actually need to survive? Well, a letter home from Minerva Stone gives us this fascinating, really practical list, and it kind of shatters any romantic ideas about pioneer life. Forget grand supplies. What was truly valuable out there? A good supply of liquor, for medicinal purposes, tea, so you could boil the foul water and have something safe to drink, a syringe for giving medicine, and good, sturdy, ready-made shoes. This list, it just grounds this epic story in very real, very human needs.
Now, the journey wasn't just about the people. It was also about their relationship with the landscape itself. A landscape that was, at turns, a source of profound beauty and just brutal, immense suffering. Angelina Farley, for example, she found these rare moments of peace in nature. Can you imagine? After weeks of dust and death and arguments, the simple sound of a river was, in her own words, sweetly soothing. It was a moment of desperately needed peace. But, and here's that contrast again, just one day earlier she described that same natural world as a total enemy. She wrote that the wind was so hot it reminded her of the scorching winds of the sandy deserts of Africa. The environment could flip from a comfort to a tormentor in the blink of an eye.
And the physical danger was just constant. The terrain itself was an active threat. In Captain Snow's company, a young boy named Ira was run over by both wheels of a heavy wagon. In another company, Minerva Stone's daughter, Olive Ann, fell and was so narrowly missed by the wagon wheels that they just scraped the skin from her leg. A single misstep, a moment of lost balance, could be fatal.
And so, finally, after 4 grueling, relentless months, they approached their destination. They were at the journey's end. But their arrival in the Salt Lake Valley would bring the final, and maybe the most challenging, contrast of them all. The hope they started with versus the despair they felt at the end.
You'd expect them to be overjoyed, right? Triumphant? But that's not what happened. On the very day she arrived, Angelina Farley didn't write about joy. She wrote about just profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The people, she said, were completely worn down. And then she adds, I have scarcely life enough to rejoice. All disappointed in the country. Just a shocking, heartbreaking end to such an ordeal. And that really leaves us with the central, haunting question of their entire journey. They survived the disease, the conflict, the brutal landscape. They buried their children, their friends, their family all along that Cholera Road. But after you endure the unimaginable, what happens to your spirit? When the promised land, the very thing you sacrificed everything for, turns out to be a disappointment.